what does resilient culture look like? And my sense is that just a psychological, categorical analysis is that we're actually not built to handle the stresses and the challenges that we're facing right now, because we're almost 100 years into being conditioned as fragmented, isolated, rational consumer individuals. So we've all been conditioned to almost be like potted plants, and we're wrapped in plastic and our root balls are all bunched up and we have to rely on artificial watering and artificial light and artificial nutrients, right? But if you think, and of course we blow over, and of course we get mold and mildew and fungus and all these things, and of course we're not resilient and a shadow of our former selves. But when you realize, we have to take our stand in a stand of relationships and networks and ecology. And the beautiful, we took our kids to do a canopy tour in the redwoods in California a few years ago. And the interpreter was like, hey, here's the deal. And this was before that book Overstory came out. It was before all of these neat books that have been acknowledging this. And she was just like, yeah, here's the deal. The redwoods that are down in the creek shunt water to the ones that are up on the ridgeline and are dry. When one of them gets attacked by a beetle or a pest or a fungus, the others instantly understand and develop antibodies. And even albino redwood trees, and they pointed to one, they're like, evolution, law of the jungle, that motherfucker should not live. A plant that cannot conduct photosynthesis does not get to spread its genes. And the entire ecosystem of the redwood grove funneled food to the albino tree. And it was not as big as the biggest, but it was thriving. Wow. So you're like, okay, so what if we moved more towards that, right? Because all of our anxiety, depression, diseases of despair, all of these are coming because we're isolated, potted plants. And if it's I, me, mine now, and that's how we've been conditioned as consumers. Every itch has a scratch, and if not, I pull a Becky and call the manager, right? Or a Karen, right? Like I'm upset. I want mine.
My rights, yeah.
That is not going to be up to the task. But if you go back to, again, think of any of those diaspora peoples, like I guarantee you their lives have sucked, roaming, in transition, et cetera. Why do they keep going? It's the Israelites and the Moses in the desert for 40 years. We keep on going even if we won't get ours. And this goes back to that Stockdale paradox. We keep going on behalf of our children's children. And it feels like integrating some form of like 7 generational awareness, right? Which is the idea of like, hey, I'm acting, and not just 7 generations ahead, which is the way sometimes people describe that, but 3 generations behind me. What did my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents do to give me even this crack at life? Almost certainly, for most of us, they had to embrace harder things than we did.
For sure.
Right? So you're like, okay, hat tip and gratitude, and let me not fuck up the lead you gave me. And then and I stand in the center, and then what's 3 generations ahead of me? I can absolutely wrap my head around my children, right? We're just biologically hardwired. I can even think of my grandchildren. That's not a stretch at all. So add 1 more. And now I am in the center of that 7 generational orbit or ecosystem, bridging time and space. And I'm galvanized in my responses, right? So my stress levels, my fear, my sense of even my own narrative, all get expanded and buffered. And they've done studies that show that children who know the family story, interestingly, who know not just their parents, but their grandparents as well, they less depression, less anxiety, higher SAT scores, higher attendance and completion of university. It's literally like being inoculated. And the story, interestingly, the family stories that are the most inoculating, they have the most positive effect on outcomes, isn't like we kick ass, like go team USA. It's like, hey, this is us. This is who's come before you. We've had our shares of ups and downs, and we're still here. Like those kinds of stories of triumph and disaster and perseverance are the ones that actually galvanize us the best. And you're like, oh, that's beautiful. So really, I would say that the best way forward into our future is to, not in a nostalgic way, but in a respectful and intentional way, is to dust off and go back to the past and realize that we cannot weather this storm as isolated potted plants. And we have to put down our roots into an ecology of relationship, both in space, the stand in the stand of, we take our stand in a stand, and then time, the 7 generations. And that again, doesn't let us off any of the hooks, but it at least gives us a fighting chance.